So the day after Stalin dies, a smooth-faced bureaucrat steps up to a microphone. He's not a general. He's not a showman. He's a committee man. And for a few tense months, the second most powerful person in the Soviet Union is suddenly first. And his name is Georgy Malenkov. I'm Matt Hasquin. I'm a high school history teacher, and I'm taking you line by line through Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire." We started a new line, a new lyric here, and so we went from Joseph Stalin, now we're to Malenkov. So let's go through the story here. So it's March 1953, it's Moscow, and Stalin is dead, and the air in the Kremlin feels, kind of thin. The leadership announces a collective arrangement to kind of calm the country. Malenkov becomes premier, which is the head of the government, and around him you have the party fixer Nikita Khrushchev, you have the secret police boss Beria, you have veterans like Molotov and Bulganin, and it looks orderly, but in truth it isn't. Because Malenkov isn't a battlefield legend, right? He's a staff guy. He's a personnel files guy who rose with Stalin by knowing everything about everyone. In wartime, he oversaw aviation and weapons programs. In peacetime, he managed promotions and purges and paperwork that could end a career or a life. Yet, his first months in charge sound surprisingly soft. The new government floats a new course. It shifts some resources from heavy industry toward consumer goods. They lighten taxes on folks that live in the countryside. They ease some of the repression. The regime announces a big amnesty for lesser offenders of crimes and admits the doctor's plot was a frame-up. And for a moment, the future in the Soviet Union begins to tilt, right, from towards refrigerators instead of rockets. But the danger in the room has a name, and that's Beria. He moves fast. He's grabbing up ministries. He's posing as a reformer. He's terrifying everyone who remembers what he can do. And in June of 1953, Malenkov and Khrushchev make the most important decision of their lives. They turn on Beria. And in a dramatic presidium meeting, marshals burst in, Beria is arrested, and he's later shot. And that means the terror's architect is gone. And with Beria out, the balance shifts again. September of 53, Khrushchev becomes first secretary of the Communist Party. And that job controls the party apparatus. Malenkov keeps the premiership, but the political center of gravity is sliding away from him towards Khrushchev. Now, Malenkov tries to keep his consumer-first line, right? And he's even warning, which was unusual for a Soviet leader, that a nuclear war would be a catastrophe for civilization, right? And so you have hardline colleagues that begin to grumble that he's going soft on heavy industry, he's getting soft on ideology. And in February of 1955, he's pushed out as the premier, and he's replaced by Bulganin. Now, Malenkov stays visible, but he begins to shrink away, and he remains as kind of a deputy in the party. Now, his final act, well, not his final act, but like the final act to his story, I guess, that's the way I should say it, is in 1957. Malenkov joins Molotov and Kaganovich to remove Khrushchev. They call it defending collective leaderships. The party calls it the anti-party group, and it fails. Khrushchev survives, and Malenkov is exiled to obscurity. He manages a power plant in Kazakhstan, and so he goes from a former premier of the Soviet Union to counting kilowatts. He lives quietly for decades, and he dies in 1988. He's almost a ghost, from the hinge moment after Stalin, right? It's why does it matter? Why does Malenkov matter? Well, Malenkov in Billy Joel's lyric is the beat between two worlds. It's the last breath of Stalin's system and the start of de-Stalinization. He proves that early reforms weren't only Khrushchev's idea, and that power in the Soviet Union flowed through party versus government titles, and that survival at the top meant choosing sides fast. Now, if we tie this back to the song, right after Joseph Stalin, Billy Joel sings Malenkov, and that's the uneasy handoff before the next wave of change, right? So we're going to get into Nasser and Prokofiev, and so I'll have a video next on Nasser. So, which mattered more, when you think about this, for the thaw in the Cold War in the Soviet Union, right? Was it Beria's removal? Was it Khrushchev's rise to power? Yeah. This one, I felt like it was going to be kind of tricky when we transitioned between Stalin and Malenkov, but hey, it moves along quickly just like the song does. So thanks for watching.